Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm so excited to dive into this event. We're going to discover the ins and outs of case studies and also how to utilize them to your advantage to secure new customers and increase your revenue. I'm so excited to share a little bit of background information on our esteemed expert today, Amanda Lien. Amanda is a content writer and strategist specializing in crafting compelling copy for nonprofits and founders in the B2B, B2C, and SaaS spaces. She draws on takeaways from crafting high conversion case studies for brands like Jolie, Obvi, Factory Quality, Brooklinen, and so many more to empower entrepreneurs to tell their stories their way with data to back up their impact. We are so excited to learn from your expertise today, Amanda. We also know how valuable your time is, and we're just so grateful to you for investing in Dreamers and Doers in the community in this way. One quick thing that I'll mention before we dive in is that Amanda is planning to leave lots of time for Q&A at the end of her presentation, so you can hold your questions until the very end, and then we'll dive into Q&A. With that, I will hand it over to you. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you for the intro. You're going to make a gal blush. Hi, everybody. Whether we've never met before or we have, nice to meet you. I'm Amanda. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I think I cracked the code for using Microsoft PowerPoint streaming without dual screens because I only have one monitor. So hopefully my genius actually does no bounds and everything will be fine. I'm kidding. I make a lot of terrible jokes. Feel free to laugh or not. But yes, welcome. Welcome to this silly little presentation of mine with my little cartoons. I can't resist. I am really excited to be here. I get very excited talking about case studies, and I can't wait to invite you into my world for a little bit. Like Nicole mentioned, I am leaving plenty of question time at the end because I know that for a lot of people, writing is a terrifying concept. And if you don't consider yourself a writer, that's okay. I tried to make this as accessible as possible. That said, if you have questions, please feel free to jot them down in the chat, write them down on a sticky note. You can turn your microphone on and ask them, or write it in the chat and I'll back read if you prefer. Whatever is accessible to you, I'm here to help you learn and actually get some value out of this. So however that works, do what you got to do. And speaking of accessibility, I did also do my best to make this presentation as visually accessible as possible. But if you find that it is not visually accessible, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to make any amends to it that's needed, clarify anything to you. Obviously, I want to make sure that things are as accessible as they can be. So with all of that said, in case we've never met, this is me. I'm a career content and marketing professional. I'm currently in Southeastern Virginia. If you know where Virginia Beach is, I'm like in that general vicinity, but I spend a lot of time in the Bay Area in San Francisco, California. I founded a company, Minutiae Content Co. earlier this year. It's really everything that I've been doing, just with a company name, not just with me. I thought it was fun idea to take the next step after been doing this for almost 6 years. So yeah, and I love teaching other people how to put together information that they need to boost their business and elevate their impact. And that's why we're here together. So without further ado, let's dig in. I managed to distill down all of my crazy ramblings and outline. You don't want to know what that outline looked like, into 4 simple points. We're going to go over the anatomy of a case study, collecting and tracking data, conducting interviews, and using all of that data, the interviews, the numbers, all that stuff to tell a story. And there's plenty of visuals. So if the visuals help you, if you're a visual learner, please feel free to take screenshots. I am totally okay with that. Again, whatever makes this learning accessible to you, I'm down for it. I got you. So the anatomy of a case study is a funny thing because when you think about it, it's actually quite simple. I think that for a lot of people, when you stare at a case study, it feels very high level, sort of intimidating. But going back to my journalism school roots, you really only need the who, what, when, how, why, and then the secret 6th thing, the results. So if you were to think about the opening couple paragraphs of your case study, it should highlight most of these things. This is kind of like the skeleton, and then we'll put some meat on the bones. First, think about who you served. Who's the subject of your case study, and also who's your target audience. For instance, if you're working in the D2C space, working with D2C partners, highlighting a partner in a case study is a great option because it serves a dual purpose of highlighting your industry expertise and also highlighting what you can do for others that are in that that subject's same space. The goal of a case study is to highlight what you do well and how you do it. It's also to leverage it as a marketing tool later on, whether that's social media, newsletters, sending out to prospects. We'll cover that in a little bit later on. But identifying who you served that fits your target audience should be the first strategic step in figuring out who even you should be talking to for a case study. And obviously the what and the when, it kind of goes hand in hand. Obviously you think about, oh, this is the person or the company that I served, and then here's what I did for them, and here's how long it took. These are pretty self-explanatory, but I put them in there because I like who, what, why, and how, and all that stuff. So I like alliteration, what can I say? But make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you did for your case study subject and why it's remarkable. That should be pretty easy to understand because it answers the question, why did they choose you? What about your solution mattered? What about your solution drove impact? Pretty simple question, pretty simple answer. You know your stuff, you know what you're doing. Also think about the how. How did you drive those results in both qualitative and quantitative ways? And how is that, again, unique to you? What solution did you provide? Did you offer that made them want to work with you? Brag on yourself. This is the time to be your own personal hype person, so don't be shy about it. And the results, obviously, goes without saying, but what data shows that your specific results were meaningful, relevant, and unique? This is oftentimes the hardest part for people to articulate to themselves, in my experience, is what were the results just stated with the excellence that your work demands? I feel like a lot of times that we as women, people who are not men, have a hard time hyping ourselves up, stating our accomplishments boldly and proudly. It's a hurdle that I've seen a lot when I do case study interviews for my clients. They struggle with just saying it flat out and outright. Here's what we did and here's how great it was. But this is, again, the time to brag on yourself. Be your own personal hype person, because if you can't do it, who else is gonna? That's maybe a little bit of a joke, but you get what I mean. So if you really want to distill it down, problem plus solution. Ooh, sorry, I bumped my mic. Problem plus solution equals case study. It can actually be that simple. If you are thinking about doing a case study and you are stressed out to the max, this feels like a concept that is just too many bites to even begin trying to chew. Think about the problem that you solved for a client and think about what the solution was. You have the bare bones of a case study. Congratulations, woohoo! That is at its core where it all starts, and you can just build everything else on top of that. And we're going to talk about how, but first, I like examples. I'm an experiential learner, so I wanted to give you an example. These are screenshots from one of the many case studies I've written over the course of my life, with a little bit of a breakdown, because I like to do things like gesture and wildly and point at things. So these are, again, just the really bare bones things you can include in a case study to make it actually make sense, as the kids say. So this is the opening paragraph right up at the top that reflects the problems and sets you up as a solution. So we have, who are they? They're a D2C brand with strong roots in e-com. They've seen success in this way and they want to build on it. That's their problem. And there's a breakdown bullet point of 3 main things that they wanted to do, problems they wanted to solve. Organic social media posts and stories that were shoppable, integrating those posts into their Shopify-based presence, and sharing those shoppable ads on social media. These are all problems that they didn't have a solution for. Obviously, the title also does some heavy lifting here. On this particular title, I optimized it to highlight the results, the data, and the impact all in one go. This might take some wordsmithing. Please do not be hard on yourself if it is not an easy, lightning bolt to the brain. You can do this. Not every case study is going to be so simple to summarize in a title, and it's hard. I think I probably stared at this title for a good 4 hours, moving words around, adding words, deleting words. We don't talk about it. It's fine. It's all part of the process. That's what I tell myself. But, by saying something like, how your company did certain results by data point with your client, it's a pretty solid formula just for starting out, or maybe if you want to make it a formula for all of the case studies on your website. But again, it highlights the results, the data, and the impact in one shot. And then obviously I asked for metrics, and you'll notice that not all of these metrics that I highlighted in a kind of that middle right-hand section, not all of those metrics are numbers. Sure, 2 of them are, but the third one is about outperformance in terms of partnerships. And that was anecdotal data, anecdotal evidence that I received from the client when I asked for data. And we'll talk about kind of the differences and how to make that happen. But again, these are really, really simple takeaways, at least simple to me. Everyone's threshold is different, but these are really simple ways that you can integrate your data, your impact, your relevance, as well as the basics like who, what, why, and how, without being too wordy. If you're the kind of person that just doesn't relish the idea of sitting down and writing, or you're like me and you're not very verbose on a good day in front of a Word document, a case study is actually a perfect solution for you because they're meant to be short. It's quick hit, 1, 2, 3. Here's the problem. Here's what we did. Here's how we solved the problem, and here's what they're doing in the future. It can just be 1, 2, 3, and then you're good to go. Now let's talk data. A lot of folks who signed up for this little session to hang out with me for an hour had a lot of questions about data, which is understandable. Collecting data, understanding what data to collect, it can be stressful, it can be a lot. So I tried to break it down in the most generally applicable way possible. But of course, if you have questions about it for your particular scenario, just let me know. I'm happy to help. Qualitative data is what we often call in the biz anecdotal evidence. By the biz, I mean marketing. The experiences and POV of the customer, whether that is your client's customer or your customer, whoever's customer it is, their experiences, their perspective, that's considered qualitative data. It's data that's not measurable, but motivates customers and clients nonetheless. A lot of people who are working on case studies, I find they get really entrenched in numbers. They want it to just be data, just be numbers, percentages, ROI, KPIs, all those things. And don't get me wrong, those numbers are immensely, intensely valuable, and they should be part of your case study. But what I found is that oftentimes qualitative data is just as powerful. Human beings make emotion-based decisions. It's just who we are. It's what we do. And when we make emotion-based decisions, it's usually one of two things. We either have a solution that we want to find out in the wild. We know what we want. We just need to find somebody to do it. But more often it's the second thing, which is that we have a problem. It is stressing us out and we need it to go away. And that is it. And if you can be the answer to that problem and you can demonstrate through the case study that you were the answer to that problem, you're demonstrating not only through numbers, but also through emotional appeal and value that you can help serve someone else, serve their business, serve what they're building, serve who they are by taking that stress away from them, which is not only, it's a great marketing practice, but more importantly, it kind of comes with the territory of being a kind human being, which I know all of us are. Who wouldn't want to take the stress off of somebody's plate? So that's how I approach it. Quantitative evidence is, something that we're probably all a little bit more familiar with. It's the hard evidence, it's the numbers, it's the growth percentages, it's the, rankings that jump, it's the KPIs, any data that can be measured or tracked. Now, depending on your industry, depending on what you're doing, your clients or anyone that you're working with, interviewing for these case studies, they might be more or less willing to give you that data. In my experiences, a lot of organizations are more than willing to chat with me when I let them know that I'm working on a case study for my client who worked with them. I'm kind of like the middleman. I'll reach out and say, hey, I work with so-and-so. I would love to talk with someone on your team about a case study. Could you please bring a couple of data points you feel are incredibly relevant to the work you've done with so-and-so, my client? And they're usually more than happy to give that data up. There's only been a couple of scenarios in which they haven't been, but those were highly regulated industries such as finance and healthcare. And obviously you might have to do a little bit of wordsmithing and lean a little bit more onto qualitative evidence in those cases because some things are confidential and companies might not be so willing to share, but it never hurts to ask. And we'll talk about making that ask in a second because I wrote scripts because I like to write scripts. What can I say? I'm a caricature of myself. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, Amanda, what the heck are examples of this data? Like, it's great that I know qualitative and quantitative data, but this isn't high school science class. What's the dealio? I'm so glad you asked. I made another chart. I like charts. If you haven't noticed that by now, I like charts. So on the left-hand side, we have data that is numbers-based, quantitative. On the right side, we've got qualitative. So increases in visible metrics, that's a big one. Usually when I reach out to someone and ask for data for a case study and I get the sense, or they ask me straight up, hey, I don't know what to include, can you give me examples? I say, increases in visible metrics. Did your ROI go up? Did your engagement go up? Did your conversion go up? Those sorts of things. Same thing with number 2, decreases. Did you see a decrease in product returns? Did your bounce rate go down? Did your newsletter unsubscribe rate go down by 40%? Whatever those numbers are. And then also, this is something that I like to include because it really drives home, in my opinion, the versatility of many of the products or services my clients have offered, which is A/B test results that demonstrates your proposed solution works. I can't tell you how many times I've written in a case study, we, meaning my client, we A/B tested XYZ solution and found that this worked and here's why in simple bullet points. This demonstrates not only do you know what you're doing enough to A/B test, but you are thoughtful enough to A/B test for your client. You're interested in finding the right solution, not creating a plug and play solution. Obviously, this doesn't apply to everyone in every industry, but it is always worth thinking about what the A/B test results were. And again, you can ask. You can reach out to a client and say, hey, I know we A/B tested that newsletter solution. Can you go internally real quick and see which one had better results of what kind? Or maybe you're already tracking that information, in which case you can let them know that you're just going to use that intel. And then we have the quantitative side. The qualitative, excuse me, side. Decrease in a negative external experience is a big one, like an easier to navigate website. I had a client who was working in the web dev space, and the biggest thing that anyone I interviewed for a case study mentioned was how much easier their customers said the website was to navigate after working with my client for whom I was writing the case study. Anything that the people that the customer is serving say is a great thing, whether that's a decrease in a negative experience or an increase in a positive experience, that's money, pun not intended. Also think about increase in positive outcomes, whether that's external or internal. Maybe your case study subject, the person who your client served, or you served rather, if you were me, it'd be your client. But maybe the person you worked with had less stress. They got more time back. They were able to grow their team. They were able to better outsource other functions once they got this one key thing under control. All of those things, positive outcomes notwithstanding, regardless of whether they're with, the people that they serve or with them themselves, those are really, really important to capture. And also don't forget to capture those direct quotes. I know that interviewing can be really anxiety inducing for a lot of us, and I don't blame you at all, but capturing direct quotes that demonstrate your expertise and why they chose you are really powerful. It gives you a great pull quote to use for social media. Pull quote is when you have that one single quotation that maybe you feature on the social image on your post, or maybe that's part of the title of your case study. But those are immensely powerful versions of social proof because it's words straight from the person's mouth, not just a paraphrase. I recommend using something like Otter AI. I know there's a lot of tools out there that do this, but Otter AI is my go-to for interviews because it not only records the interview straight out of Zoom, but it also transcribes it for you. And if you're like me and you need subtitles for like pretty much your entire life, that is immensely helpful and valuable. So it might be worth looking into. I think it's like $100 a year. So the subscription isn't even that pricey if you think about it for the value that it can provide when you're conducting these interviews for case studies. And again, I know that I've said this 1,000 times, but it bears repeating. Also because I have made a cool Venn diagram. To maximize your case study success, include both. You're selling two things, a tangible outcome and the feeling that comes with it. It's not just about the results you deliver, it's also about what that does. A lot of times I think we get hung up on, here's what we did and here are the results. But then what comes after? More time, more energy, less stress, less overhead, whatever the solution is, people respond to emotional appeal. And it doesn't have to be sleazy, it doesn't have to be slinky. In fact, I discourage that. But the simple fact of the matter is people have emotional responses to things. And I know that I, for one, have paid money, I have paid time just to have less stress. Don't underestimate the power of those kinds of appeals. If you do it right, if you leverage it alongside data and with direct quotes to substantiate that you're not just saying, oh, we reduced their stress. If you've got someone, a founder, a leader, whomever saying that you did reduce stress, that's a great case study right there from both the qualitative and quantitative perspective. So the next logical question, right, is okay, you know what you're doing case study structure wise, you know what kind of data you should be asking for, both qualitative and quantitative. Who are you asking? So who makes a great case study candidate? Obviously, this varies depending on many things. Your point of contact, the industry you're working in, what kind of engagement y'all had. But generally speaking, someone who's willing to speak enthusiastically about your results and someone who was excited about the work you've done together, but also organizations within your niche and organizations that benefit from your differentiating service. Perhaps you offer more than one service or product, but there's one that makes you stand apart from the crowd. In that case, I would recommend focusing on the organizations, the people that you've served with that differentiating service or product. Whatever it is that sets you apart, highlight that, because again, this case study doesn't just serve as a tool to show off what you can do, it's also a marketing tool that you can leverage to say, hey, this differentiating service or product of mine, This is the results that it drove. Wouldn't you like a piece of that action? Because other people do, I promise. So focusing on strategically on those two moving pieces, both the niche that you're in and the services that are, or products that are differentiating, those are going to be your gold mines. And obviously, start with the people that you worked directly with. They're probably the most likely to speak enthusiastically about your results and the work you've done together, but maybe you need to think outside the box, or maybe there's been turnover. Do your best to identify someone, and when in doubt, I always just send an email saying, hey, for an example, I worked with a client to craft case studies, but the person they originally worked with had left the organization. So I reached out and said, hi, I'm with such and such, my client, and my client worked with so and so, who's since departed you. Do you have a recommendation for who else I could speak to about this? We'd really like to highlight the work we did for your company. It can be that simple. But I've been scripting a lot, so let's go to the next slide where there's actually some scripts in quotations. Getting the data you need and the interviews you want is sometimes the most time-consuming part of the process, I'm not going to lie, because you have to email people. You have to go back and forth sometimes. People take a while to respond. You probably got to follow up. That's why I always recommend making the ask early. Ask clients or partners or customers, whatever you choose to call them, to participate in the case study either right after you complete your engagement or right when you confirm you're moving forward long term. Maybe it was like, you did a project and they said, hey, we want to bring you on, your solution on, your product on, we want to use your product, whatever it is long term. That would be the time to make the ask. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad that we're continuing. I would love to chat with you a bit more about your experience with us so far and highlight it in a case study to distribute across socials and put on our website. You can just slip it right on in there, be smooth about it. That's probably the best time to ask. If you're thinking of someone right now and it's been a little while, there's no time limit per se. There's no worries. It just, if you have someone in mind right now, I would reach out to them and just, shoot them an email, but it's always a little bit easier when you're, right in front of them, so to speak. It's top of mind, but there's nothing saying you can't reach out to someone from last year and ask, hey, it's been a while. I'd love to revisit the work we've done together in a case study. Can we set up a time to talk? Speaking of, letting them know why is probably a good part of the ask. I know it sounds like basic and simple, but I did mostly use that as an excuse to put together my go-to sentence, which is tweaked for y'all instead of me representing a client. But I'd love to highlight your business and the work we did for you through a case study that we'll share on our site and on social channels, tagging you, of course, because again, while the primary function of the case study is a mechanism for your marketing and elevating what you do, giving back is always nice. I know we're all about that. That's why we're in Dreamers and Doers. And being able to tag, your client, hype them up a little bit on social media, it's a nice benefit. And it usually makes them more inclined to, join in and actually want to be part of the case study. Share the quantitative data you're looking for ahead of time. This data might take some time to pull together, so don't just drop that ask on them in the interview. I would recommend once they confirm the interview, reaching back out and saying, great, thanks so much, looking forward to it. By the way, I'd love like 2 or 3 numbers, depending on, of course, what you did for them, your actual ask would be different, but ask then so they have time to get it together, dig into their dashboards, ask their data team to pull together a dashboard, whatever it is, but give them some time because it's not as often as you might think that those folks have it on the top of their minds. I'm always actually surprised when it does happen in interviews I conduct because usually it's not the case. They have to pull it together. And if they wait until after the interview to pull it together, you're hunting them down, you're emailing them over and over again for sometimes weeks just to get it. And when that's the last piece of the puzzle you need for the case study, it can be a little stressful. And speaking of the actual interview itself, asking open-ended questions is always the best way to get those great quotes. Something like, how did you feel before you engaged us? And what about our solution felt like the solution for you? It's open-ended, not yes or no. It opens the door for them to talk passionately and excitedly about the work that they're doing and the work you helped them do. And it's always fun to hear people talk passionately about what they do, in my opinion. So maybe I'm biased toward it, but I think that this is a really easy way to get the conversation flowing, to make it feel less like a high pressure interview and more like a conversation with an end objective of a product that not only promotes your skills and your business and the work you've done, but also shades at what the client does and how they do it. And keeping it positive, again, is probably one of those things that feels pretty like, well, yes, obviously, duh, Amanda, but I feel like it bears repeating, asking questions like, how does it feel now that these results have been achieved? How are we going to be a part of your solutions in the future? Those kinds of questions that are looking ahead with optimism or looking back with optimism will, again, garner great quotes, but also get the customer thinking, the client thinking about what you did and how much it mattered and how much it helped. And again, that leads to better outcomes for the case study and sometimes also better chances that you'll get referrals from that client because it'll get them thinking, oh yeah, I really loved working with them. I should kick their website to somebody else that I know that could use their services. Again, not the end goal, but a nice benefit. And also, don't forget to, when you get the quantitative data, ask them what numbers stood out and highlight those. Even if they say in the interview some numbers, follow that up with the data. So if they're sharing information in the interviews that backs up the data they're sending you, use those quotes. Don't be shy. If they call out a specific percentage, a specific, rate of ROI, a lowered newsletter unsubscribe rate, mark that down in your notes or highlight it in Otter later, because if you can back up that data with quotations, that's all the more powerful social proof that what you're doing works. Now, interviewing is terrifying for a lot of people. I wanted to make it as easy as possible by putting together this little outline. You can quite literally follow these 7 steps, ask these 7 questions. If that's all that you can find time for, if that's all that you're able to do, if stage fright gets you, no judgment, by the way, because I feel that. But if you ask these questions, you're probably going to get everything you need to craft a case study. If you ask about the problems that they had, what about your approach made them think you were the ideal partner, the implementation process, the solution, the results, like you've got all the pieces here. The 7th question is one that is really dependent on your situation. If you worked with this client, this person, if you served them with your product just one time, maybe don't ask that question if it's not relevant, but use your best judgment because a lot of times it is relevant. And for me, I always find it fun to put a little section at the end of case studies I write for clients. I have headers that have, say the problem, then there's the solution, then there's the results. And I like to put in the future as a little 4th one, if it's applicable, because sometimes it's fun to hear that, oh, this, connection that we made together, this problem they solved has now driven home that they're an integral part of our solution going forward. And if you can nod to, oh, here, going forward in the future, we're going to continue to be their solution to their problem, it underscores that you really are the solution. And at the end of reading that case study, who isn't going to want to sign up for that? Who isn't going to want to be interested, click a button to contact you or sign up for your services or access your product or whatever? So again, use your best judgment with number 7, but I think it's always worth asking if it's appropriate because you never know what information you'll glean if you do. Like I just said, here's a visual. I break down most case studies I write for clients into 3 sections. You really only need these 3 to quickly, succinctly, accurately sum up the difference you make in the work that you do. I am keeping it so simple on purpose. Case studies don't have to be complicated, number 1, but number 2, not everyone's a writer. Not everyone does what I do and stares at a Word document and types on their keyboard all day, which is completely fine, but this serves as proof that in theory, anyone can craft a case study. And you shouldn't be scared of it. Please don't be scared of it. I promise it's not scary. If you do get scared, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm always happy to help or advise. Now, after the case study, this is the fun part. I mean, it's all fun to me, but this is the fun part because you've written this case study, you've toiled in the minds of setting up interviews and getting data, whatever that data looks like from the list I shared earlier, and now you can share it. The first thing I always recommend clients do is add a contact link at the bottom of the case study. If this isn't something that I've already done inline, some folks prefer to put like a little button in, which is something that their web designers or they do on their end. But add that in so people interested can inquire about your work for themselves. Again, the case study is meant to be a marketing tool. You got to hook people with the case study, but then give them somewhere to go if they want to work with you, if they want a piece of that action that you've given to your other clients. Promote it on your website or put together multiple case studies and make a whole page. A lot of times the folks that I work with, they want to get 2 to 3 case studies together and then launch them all at the same time onto a brand new case studies page that lives on their header or their footer or both. Again, powerful marketing, powerful proof of concept, powerful way to demonstrate. Here are actual human beings, living, breathing people in their companies that I served, and here's how we did it, to get people thinking about, oh, they could do that for me. That's pretty cool. Maybe I should get a piece of that action. I also always recommend sharing it on the relevant social media channels, wherever your audience hangs out, whether that's the platform formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, a combination thereof. And don't forget to tag the brand partners, people you worked with for the case study from that company for added visibility. It makes them feel good, makes you feel good, brings in more audiences because if they like it, share it, retweet it, whatever, appropriate industry statements are based on platform, that brings even more eyes on your case study and the impact that you drive. Also add it to your newsletter. If your company has a newsletter, if you have a personal newsletter, add that in as tangible proof of the cool stuff you're doing. And also, this is something that a lot of folks forget, but I find that it's really valuable. Send it to prospective clients in your pipeline as proof of what you're doing in their space. Whether it's a quick follow-up email like, hey, just wanted to reach out one more time and send over this link to this case study that we just released about, how we helped XYZ company do XYZ things, or it's something you send over as part of an initial pitch or RFP. I find that it's an incredibly powerful tool to use to get more folks on board with what you're doing and how you're doing it. We finally come to the end of me blabbing, I promise. I did have a couple of final thoughts that I didn't want to break up the flow of the conversation with, especially if folks are taking notes, but I did want to toss them out there now that I've got you thinking about all things case studies. You can always put together a data form if you find you're doing a lot of case studies, or it's just easier for your brain. Our brains all work in different funky ways. But sending clients a form via Google, Asana, I think Monday.com's got one, Typeform, whatever platform you like. They can share their data that way if that's easier, if that's more accessible for them. That's always an option. Again, do what feels right for you. Do what feels right for the people that you're working with to craft these case studies. My mantra is always to make life as easy as possible for anyone that I'm asking for things. So, I put together forms all the time, but again, up to you, up to your unique situation. Just a little, seed I wanted to plant in there. Also, don't be afraid to ask. You would be so surprised how willing most people are to share the good you've done for them or their organization. It might feel awkward, it might feel weird, it might feel like you're cold emailing, but don't be shy about asking for a case study interview. Most of the times you can knock out those interviews in 20 minutes. You can ask them for data and they can give it to you in maybe a week max, but it's always worth asking. Again, I feel like we as women, we as people who are not, we're not born male, we have a hard time because it's been, kind of conditioned into us by society that when we ask for things, we're inconvenient, we're annoying, we're bossy. We're not. We're business owners. We did some cool stuff for other people, other clients, other businesses in our space. We want to talk about it. There is no shame in that game. So don't be afraid to ask. If you need a cheerleader, consider me your cheerleader. Don't be afraid to ask. Finally, it is okay to outsource. This is something that I've come across time and time again in conversations with lots of folks across lots of different spaces and industries and for lots of different reasons. If this feels like a heavy lift, if you get into the case study thing and you realize, okay, this is not fun, I don't have time for this, it's stressing me out, you can outsource. There are people who can and will take this off your plate. It is not a failure on your part as a marketer, as an entrepreneur, a founder, a business person, an owner, whatever you choose to call yourself. It's not a failure. It just means it's not your thing. We can't all have all the things. It's just not humanly possible. And for some of us, this is just, it's not, as the kids say, the vibe, and that's okay. So if in case you need a little bit of empowerment that if you try this and it's not your thing, or maybe you're listening to this presentation going, this sounds cool, don't ever want to do it though, understandable. If you still want the case studies but don't want to actually do the thing, you can outsource it. There's no shame in that. It is 100% okay. Speaking as someone to whom people do outsource this stuff, I know I don't judge. I don't think anyone else judges. It's just outsourcing like you do with anything else. And with that said, I did want to leave this slide you could screenshot in case you ever want to get in touch. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me via DMs on Dreamers and Doers or via email. Whether you've got questions after this workshop is over, or if you're watching this on recording and have questions, hit me up anytime. And then I've also got my LinkedIn and my founded firm's website in case you want to find me at multiple platforms. But with that, thank you very much for taking the time to listen. And I am going to check the chat, and I'm more than happy to answer any and all questions you may have. And if there are no questions, that's okay too.
Thank you
people are raising hands.
Oh yeah, go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I get to call on people. It's like I'm a school teacher. My mom would be so proud as an ex-teacher. So yes, Diane.
This is fantastic. And thank you for giving me a framework for my session next week. I think I might do some case studies where I'm not sure I was going to do that as much as I thought I was going to do it. I can start with a case study about when my neck broke out in blotches of red because I was so terrified as a speaker when I was just getting started. Somebody thought I was allergic to peanuts and stopped me.
Oh, goodness.
So if I talk about case studies, I sometimes feel like I go into too much detail. And also, I don't name people. I don't tend to name people for a variety of reasons. One, the aggravation of getting permission, because I work with a lot of law firms, and I talk about, how attorneys are afraid of networking, and particularly women attorneys and some of these things. And it's a generic, broad I look at patterns and I use that as a
Mhm.
case study. How can I make that sound like it's really true, not like I've just made it up because it's a fun story?
For
Is
sure.
there
So there's
anything
a
that I can do to kind of pull in data, or what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, so there's a couple of tactics that I've employed, ironically, particularly in the legal space, when I've worked with law firms, and it comes down to like their preference. There have been some cases where they're comfortable with me, as I like to joke, changing names to protect the innocent. And sometimes they're okay with that, assigning people a fake name, just being really vague about it. And oftentimes when I do that, I'll put an asterisk, but beside the first change name, and then at the bottom matter, say something like, identifying information, including but not limited to names, have been changed due to confidentiality requests or whatever, so in like a legal arena, people are going to understand that, readers are going to understand that, and especially if that's your target audience, they're going to be so glad that you're clearly respectful of your client's wishes and all of the confidentiality, things that can go into that arena. The other thing that I've done in terms of data requests is I've leaned a little bit heavier on, non-number data. So if they can give, anecdotal, whether that's actual like anecdotes, like stories, or anecdotal evidence, if they're not comfortable sharing anything that's less vague than that, I just go with it. Again, it's one of those things that in your instance, it's a casualty of the trade. And again, if your target audience for this particular case study is other law firms, they're gonna get it. They're gonna understand it. They're gonna really respect that you care enough to maintain confidentiality and not breach too far into something that's inappropriate in their minds to share. That's kind of what I do. I lean more into the anecdotal evidence, and I also ask if I could, and I make a joke out of it. Like I literally have said, mind if I use this but change names to protect the innocent? And it usually gets a laugh out of them because they're lawyers and they think that's funny. So those are the two kind of tactics that I take when I'm in that particular. Same thing with things like healthcare. It's kind of the same vibe. Anyone else? Questions, comments, concerns? Hope no concerns, but who knows?
I think Morgan has a question.
Hi,
Yeah.
Morgan. What's up?
Oh man, this was like so valuable. Thank you.
Of course.
And I love what you said about like case studies not being verbose, because I have in my head like a white paper image with like a ton of text. But I'm wondering like how to build this in as part of like the standard service. Um, because when we get on a call with a prospective client, one of the first questions I ask is like, why are you switching service providers now? And that usually gives me, in that initial inquiry and then consultation, I think that like starting point of what you were describing, like this is where they're at. And it's usually, very qualitative based, we're not getting things on time, they're just feeling, out of scope or what have you. And so is there a way, like, I don't know, have you seen success with like taking that bit at the start and like housing it someplace and then putting in like either smaller forms or shorter calls that like take the second half of the information needed, getting that result piece, and overall, like, is there a way to bake this into part of your process, or is it better to do it all in one fell swoop of like, okay, we're creating the case study now?
Yeah, I mean, in the instances where you're like maybe going back in time to folks that you've served, but since they're not working with and you're returning to them, it would probably make more sense to do it all in one fell swoop. But in your instance, what I've done is when I'm a big like note-taking girly. So when I'm on that initial call with a client and they say something that's like just clearly like, this is a pain point and this is the reason why they've come to me, I jot that down in the notes document in like bold, and I put off to the side, or like I use a Google Doc comment to say, recall this for case study or something like that. And then once, we've gotten a little bit more into the engagement, or, what have you, where there are actually like, solutions and results, I say, hey, something along the lines of, hey, I remember when we first talked, you mentioned that XYZ was a real pain point. And given that, and given XYZ results, results that we've seen in our time working together, would you be open to sitting down with me and diving deeper into what we've done since working together, for a case study that I can share on my website and promote on social media and tag you in? And that way, like you said, you don't have to go back in time because you've already captured that information about their pain points, and you can start from the jump, but you've already written it down somewhere that's private, just for you. But by referencing like, hey, I remember you said this thing, it lets them know that you care. You cared enough to remember that, like, this, and you wrote it down even, that this is what was driving them nuts. You were able to work toward, alleviating that pain point. And, oh, hey, by the way, do you mind talking about this a bit more so I can, do a case study about it? But that's like, it's a really casual way to like just weave it in there. But that's usually what I've done, and I've seen success that way, and they've actually been grateful that the call is a little bit shorter because of it. I can usually keep that to like 10 or 15 minutes. But that's with the caveat that like your interviews might be longer, and that's okay. I used to be a journalist, so I'm really good at interviewing people. But like the more you do it, the more practiced you are, and you can actually crank out interviews faster. So yeah, did that answer your question to your satisfaction?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. I
Fabulous.
appreciate it.
Love that. Absolutely. Anyone else have questions? And if you have questions or thoughts afterward, because I'm like the queen of the afterthought sometimes, don't hesitate to DM me or email me. I am always happy to help. All right, coolio. I don't see anything in the chat. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for spending your time with me. I really appreciate it. I'm very honored that folks chose to show up. I will stop sharing my screen and hand the mic back to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This was packed with so much amazing information, and it was so well organized, and I just appreciate you so much, and your brain and your generosity for sharing all of this amazing info. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Truly a pleasure.
I am going to, lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you, Amanda.
Oh.
I'm going to go ahead and I'll just take us home. The only thing that I'll just share really quickly in the chat is just a little bit of info. We have our survey that we share, and then also for anybody else who might be interested in also running their own event, I share the form there just in case that you're interested in doing that too. So that's there. Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to see your faces. It was wonderful to get a chance to just have some FaceTime and hang with you. So thanks for coming. And thank you again, Amanda. This was so helpful, so impactful. I'm just wishing you all a great week ahead and see you all very soon.
Thanks, y'all. Wonderful to chat with you, and I'll see you all around.
Thank you.